Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today I want to share some stories with you. Stories about women during World War II that many of us have never heard. Some of you watching might remember those years. Perhaps you remember mothers, aunts, grandmothers who worked during the war. Or maybe you were one of those women yourselves. What I've learned while researching this is quite remarkable. There were millions of women who contributed to the war effort in ways that have been overlooked by history. Today, I'd like to tell you about some of them. If you enjoy this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue making content like this. Now, let's begin. Rosie the Riveter. You've seen this image countless times. But did you know Rosie was based on a real woman? Her name was Rose Monroe. She worked at an aircraft factory in Michigan, building bombers. She was a widow with 2 young children, doing her part for the war effort. Rose wasn't alone. When America entered the war in 1941, 6 million women joined the workforce. Many had never held a job outside the home before. They learned to weld, rivet, operate heavy machinery. They built the planes, tanks, and ships that helped win the war. These women worked long hours, often in dangerous conditions, and they were frequently paid less than the men they replaced, even though they were doing the exact same work. When the war ended, something difficult happened. These women were let go from their jobs. The message from society was clear. Go back home, return to being housewives. Many women wanted to continue working, but the jobs went back to returning soldiers. The skills they'd gained, the independence they'd experienced, all of it was supposed to just disappear. In Britain, the situation was similar. Over 80,000 women joined what was called the Women's Land Army. With German submarines threatening supply ships, Britain needed to grow its own food. These women, many from cities, volunteered to work on farms. They worked from sunrise to sunset, in all kinds of weather, plowing fields, harvesting crops, caring for animals. They produced 70% of Britain's food during the war. And after the war, they received no pensions, no medals, nothing. It wasn't until 2008 that the British government gave them a commemorative badge. That's more than 60 years later. These women literally fed the nation, and they were forgotten. Now I want to tell you about something quite extraordinary. In the Soviet Union, women didn't just work in factories. Some of them flew combat missions. There was an all-female bomber squadron called the 588 Night Bomber Regiment. The Germans called them the Nachthexen, the Night Witches. These young women, many barely out of their teens, flew outdated wooden biplanes. They had no parachutes, no radios, minimal weapons. They flew at night, bombing German positions. Here's what made them so effective. They would fly in small groups, and when they approached their target, they would cut their engines and glide silently through the darkness. The only sound was the wind through their wooden wings. The Germans said it sounded like broomsticks sweeping through the air. That's where the name came from. These women flew over 30,000 combat missions during the war. Some individual pilots completed more than 800 flights. 23 of them received the Soviet Union's highest honor, the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal. But for decades, nobody in the West knew about them. Their story remained largely unknown until quite recently. By the time people started paying attention, most of these remarkable women had already passed away. Some women fought the war in a very different way, not with bombs or bullets, but with mathematics and logic. At a place called Bletchley Park in England, Allied intelligence worked to break German military codes. You may have heard of Alan Turing, the brilliant mathematician who helped crack the Enigma code. What you might not know is that 3/4 of the people working at Bletchley Park were women. Thousands of women worked as code breakers, translators, and operators of the complex machines used to decrypt German messages. They were doing highly sophisticated mathematical and analytical work. Women like Joan Clark worked alongside Alan Turing on some of the war's most difficult problems. Mavis Beatty broke Italian naval codes that helped Britain win an important sea battle. Historians estimate that the work done at Bletchley Park shortened the war by at least 2 years. That's millions of lives saved. When the war ended, these women were sworn to secrecy. They couldn't tell their husbands, their children, anyone. Many took their secrets to the grave. The work at Bletchley Park remained classified until the 1970s. Imagine doing something that helped save millions of lives and never being able to tell a soul about it. In occupied Europe, ordinary women became resistance fighters. They risked everything to fight back against the Nazi occupation. Let me tell you about Nancy Wake. Before the war, she was a socialite living in France. When the Nazis invaded, she joined the resistance. Shows photos of Nancy Wake. Nancy smuggled Allied pilots to safety, gathered intelligence, and led sabotage missions. The Gestapo put her on their most wanted list. They called her the White Mouse because she kept escaping their traps. On one mission, she cycled over 300 miles through enemy territory to replace lost radio codes. She survived the war and received medals from multiple countries. André de Jong was a young Belgian woman who created an escape route for Allied airmen. She personally guided over 100 pilots across the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. She was eventually captured and sent to concentration camps, but she survived. Women across Europe joined resistance movements. They were couriers, spies, saboteurs. If caught, they faced torture and execution. Many were never identified. Their names are lost to history. Think about the courage that took, knowing what would happen if you were caught, and doing it anyway. No group of women saw more suffering during the war than the nurses. 60,000 American nurses served during World War II. They worked in field hospitals, on hospital ships, in bombed cities. They treated the wounded under fire, often without adequate supplies or equipment. Shows nurses treating wounded soldiers. When the Philippines fell to Japan in 1942, 77 American nurses were taken prisoner. They spent 3 years in internment camps, starving and ill, watching their patients die because they had no medicine to help them. They called themselves the Angels of Bataan. Their courage under those conditions was extraordinary. More than 200 American military nurses died during the war. Yet for many years, they received no veterans' benefits, no formal military recognition. Nursing was still considered a civilian profession. There's one more story I need to share, though it's a difficult one. During the war, the Japanese military forced approximately 200,000 women into sexual slavery. They were called comfort women, a euphemism for systematic rape. Most were from Korea, but also China, the Philippines, Indonesia, and other countries. These women, some as young as 12, were held in military brothels across occupied Asia. Many died. Those who survived often kept silent for decades, carrying shame that should never have been theirs. It wasn't until the 1990s that survivors began speaking publicly. demanding acknowledgement. Many governments resisted recognizing what had happened. The debate continues today. These women spent most of their lives invisible, their suffering denied. They deserved so much better. When the war ended, there were parades for returning soldiers. And rightly so, they deserved to be honored. But the women who had kept nations running, who had fought and served and sacrificed, many of them simply went home. Their contributions were set aside, often forgotten entirely. The women we've talked about today represent millions more. Women who worked in factories, on farms, in hospitals. Women who flew planes, broke codes, fought in resistance movements. Women who survived unspeakable horrors. Some of you watching may have been those women. Or perhaps your mother was, or your aunt, or your grandmother. Maybe you've heard their stories. Maybe you haven't. Many women never spoke about what they did. For too long, these women were footnotes in history books, if they were mentioned at all. But slowly, that's changing. Memorials have been built. Museums are preserving their stories. Historians are doing the research that should have been done decades ago. But many women who deserved recognition never received it. They passed away not knowing their contribution would ever be acknowledged. The women of World War II proved something important. They proved that courage has no gender, that women are just as capable of extraordinary things as men are. They didn't do what they did for glory or recognition. They did it because their countries needed them, because it was the right thing to do, because someone had to. These women deserved better than they got. They deserved to be remembered. And now, at least, we can try to give them that. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories meaningful, please share this video. These women's stories deserve to be told. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe. Until next time, take care.